Mise en scène wasn't a huge part in our film. We didn't put as much focus on it as we should have, in my opinion. We really focused on things like how are we going to make this mysterious, but at the same time, how are we going to keep the setting in a more current time period. I think our biggest thing with mise en scène was, hey, let's dress in dark clothing and make it hard to tell the difference between us. And that was basically it. Makeup wasn't really our specialty because, of course, we were the only ones that showed up to help film. Costuming was mainly the thing I was worried about because I figured that I could just add lighting and color effects afterwards in editing. I wanted the color darker and harder to see. This wasn't so that you couldn't tell that our title sequence was lame, but instead focus on things that revolved around a mysterious vibe. I wanted the audience to always be thinking, who's that? Why is he being chased? Why is he calling for help? Of course, I had to almost completely toss the neon lights, which was sad, but we had no real reason to involve them in the film. I still tried to edit it to where the greens were green and the whites were white. Color correcting isn't really my favorite when editing, because I know audiences nowadays have really short attention spans and they enjoy bright colors, but I like it dark and ominous, and I don't really have a problem with that. What I was more focused on is how well I personally could edit the entire film, using cool implementations like cutting on action and things like that, without making the entire thing too cheesy. Of course, like any sandwich, you need a little cheese, but you can't have too much cheese. Sound was also something that I was labeled with handling. Although Tyler was in charge of finding the sounds, I was in charge of placing them correctly, and I wanted the soundtrack to be intense, but end with a nice, smooth finish, and I think I did a pretty good job in expressing that. I kept the title simple but borderline techie. I researched the top most commonly used font styles and how they were used in sci-fi films, and I chose the one that I liked the most. I included all the jobs that we had, which was producer, editing, sound, things like that. Nothing like secondhand screen directory and lighting manager, because we weren't that fancy. We were just out there filming. One of the hardest parts that we struggled with was the actual cinematography, the filming of it. There was only two of us. Our friends always bailed. They probably thought we were lame. I don't really care. We made it work, and I think we did it well. With only two people, we had to rework the script in that we didn't show both of us in one shot at the same time. It was kind of hard, definitely a challenge, but I like that in the end we did a really good and efficient job with it, and we definitely got creative. I'd be like, what if we hold the camera like this? And then I would start running with the camera at a little angle, and Tyler would come back with nah, that's too shaky, and I think we could do something a little more like this. And we go back and forth thinking of different ways to create angles. I think the worst thing was the sound overall. I didn't like how the songs came out, and the overall mixing was a little rushed on my part. It could have used more time and finesse, but we were running out of that, focusing on overall editing and special effects. Definitely the parts where dialogue and songs mixed was where the cracks were. You can for sure tell where we tried to lower it slowly and back up so that you could hear the dialogue. In the sci-fi genre, the main issue is technology. And how much of a problem it is and how scary it's becoming in the real world. If you take a look at things today like Siri and Alexa, they can instantly adapt and provide any service you're looking for through your verbal communication. These new artificial intelligence things are absolutely insane, and the further we get with all this stuff, the more realistic some of these movies are seeming to be. Social groups aren't a huge thing when it comes to sci-fi movies. It comes down to us as a society versus all the scary technology and the fear of the unknown. In most side films though, they have a main hero with a couple of sidekicks. The main hero is usually a male, and they go around saving everyone from evil. That's it. It's a really simple basis that the entire genre leans on. That's why it's so easy to influence and adapt your own twists to the story, because the conventions as a whole are so malleable. We didn't really change or challenge these representations. We sort of had our own twists and changes in mind, having the main antagonist be a loose android that was able to switch from body to body. He was basically this walking virus that was nearly impossible to catch. It follows the conventions in that this could happen in real life, and it's definitely a sticky situation that people wouldn't mess around with. I think we did a good job in depicting that, but not much in showing how the conventions influenced the film. I think that it sets an example for the audience that not all films are going to be generic looking, that some films have twists. I'm almost 100% positive that this film wouldn't be made for everyone. I feel like if we released this to the public, it would be a movie that you either love or hate. I'm assuming most would hate it. If we paired with a bigger company and had more of a cast, better equipment for recording and editing, professionals, we'd have a grade A film. But since our plot is kind of like Blade Runner in a sense, it exemplifies what I'm thinking. For one, I had never seen Blade Runner until Tyler was like, yo, you should totally check out this movie. It's cool, and I think we could learn a lot from it for our story. I didn't know it was popular, but I also see how it could be interpreted as not as popular just because it wasn't one of those kinds of movies like Star Wars or Star Trek. It didn't fit all audiences, but it was still a fantastic movie overall. Nowadays, everyone's a critic, and I'm sure our film will receive plenty of love and or hate. When we were picking a company, we wanted someone with plenty of expertise in producing a film that they've sort of been used to making. Amblin Entertainment is a great example for movies such as E.T., Back to the Future, and this new one coming out soon, Ready Player One. They're comfortable with sci-fi movies, and I'm sure they have a day's worth of corrective criticisms that we could listen to and help make our film better in general. We're also big fans of the special effects they've used in the movies, and that was really what I was researching for. We wanted someone who's produced movies with plenty of special effects and animations before, so that our film will be more professional looking. Our film will be marketed to all audiences, although all may not enjoy these sorts of action futuristic movies, mainly focusing it at teens our age who are just hitting that maturity stage and are kind of seeing the world as a whole. That's what I'd like the target audience to be. This is the sort of film that isn't necessarily recommended for younger audiences, but the gore and language is something that we could keep to a minimum so that younger ages could enjoy the cool lasers and the fighting just as much as older audiences can enjoy, say, the plot or the special effects. Again, it's marketed as a sci-fi film. It's supposed to be techy and nerdy with a little bit of story and a lot of action. That was our goal, and that's what we plan to advertise it as. We would definitely try to keep that feel throughout any commercials, advertisements, and any sort of merchandise available. I think the question is, who isn't our target audience at this point? We really want this film to be suited to any age group, any social group, any community. The main goal is to have this film be a must-watch for everybody. Although it may not be made for everyone, I would at least like to see the target audience as everyone. Again, the aim is for that maturity level of age group, but while also being available to younger and older audiences. They'd watch the film for the action, the whole cyborg, robot, android, fighting scenes, all that. The appeal for other brands such as Star Wars and Terminator are so huge right now that I'm sure audiences would love to see our film as it uses those same conventions, but with a differentiating plot that sets itself apart from others. When I came to media studies, I knew nothing about the film industry. I always took for granted how much hard work is put in while making these blockbuster films. Before, I barely touched the camera ever. At most, I'd take a picture or two when I went on vacation. I didn't edit them, of course. I always used to criticize every little thing when I watched movies, including horror movies, picking out little flaws and quirks that could be picked through, but I thought it was easy to make them at the time. Now I know it takes real dedication to making a film, and I am so sorry to all those movies out there that I really hated on. Now when I create films, I make sure to put detail into every second of the clips, making sure everything has an impactful meaning, planning for shots, figuring out what the weather is going to be like the week beforehand, to make sure we shoot everything in the same lighting and keep consistency, coming up with a board plan of ideas that we can shoot, trying each and every individual shot out to try and make things work. It's a way to express your creative freedom, but like God, it's a time consumer. Directing is a fun job to have, but it's also one of the more important roles. You need to know the film inside and out to be an efficient director. Luckily for us, it was only us, and so it was really easy to direct the film just because there was only 2 people performing in it. Revising has to be the worst part of the entire process. I hate going through the footage we shot one day, then realizing, oh wow, all the clips you recorded are in portrait mode, and we need them in landscape. We'd have to go back another day, reshoot those shots, make everything perfect. I think it was painstaking only because we shot in a public place. So when we were looking for shots, we had to wait for people to go into the actual building so that we could film. Editing and sound go together like brothers. Without editing, sound would lose meaning, and without sound, the film would be bland. In the end, I had to give up some of my choices because of editing issues, like having a less awesome laser beam effect as well as a boring eye effect. The perfect blend of the two is where you want to be, and you need to be expert in both fields to master the film. There's so much to learn in editing and sound mixing, all the way from adding filters and color corrections, down to picking apart each and every frame, touching up environments, and creating that perfect blend of sounds that makes the effect that you've been working so hard for. I learned so much over the course of this class, everything from pre-planning to editing and finalizing. The cool part that I never really knew beforehand was that we could could shoot in any order we wanted. Just based on the fact that we were going to edit it later, it didn't matter when we shot each piece of footage. Of course, our planning for storyboards was in order with the plot, but we could just say, how about we shoot this one now because the lighting is a little better, and we can shoot this one a little later when it gets darker. I learned that editing is what really makes a film a true film. Sure, if you were to just record one long take and call it a movie, like, go right ahead, but it's the time spent in shot placement, sound design, animations, cutting on action. These things are what make the movie so exciting. Being able to say, that right there took an hour to get just perfectly is amazing to me, and the bragging rights after making a decent film are bolted within it. It's not easy making a film look pretty for the big screen. One key component I learned while making a film would probably be time. Manage it wisely because you'll need plenty of it if you want to be successful. When I leave this class, I became a better filmmaker. There's still so much to learn about the film industry, but I knew nothing before this class, so I'm already a step in the right direction. Now, if I ever wanted to make a film, I'd know how to plan the shots, how to plan the shooting times, choosing location, recommended technology for filming, what to use to edit and how to use it, how to create meaning through objects, lighting, costume, and just add feeling to the movie without using specific dialogue. How to be creative with shot design in different unique ways and adding flair to each angle you use is also very, very wise. Thinking outside of the box to come up with styles and versions of shots you never thought of using before. Now I know where to start, how to position myself when in the process of creating film, and how to finalize and perfect the entire film so that the audiences are pleased with the final product. Technology was a big enemy we encountered throughout this journey of creating an opening sequence. The first biggie we came in touch with was video quality. My personal phone's camera doesn't work, so we had to opt with Tyler's Samsung HD video recording on his phone. Renting an actual film grade camera is very expensive, and we were sticking with a very low budget, so we used what resources we had. We really did start from the bottom, and now we're here. I think the most difficult part wasn't the recording itself, but rather the editing. I personally have never deeply focused on editing anything before using software on a computer. I've used Snapchat filters, maybe messed around with Photoshop for a good 10 minutes, but never had I once used things like Adobe Premiere, After Effects, Final Cut Pro, not even iMovie. These were all brand new to me, and thank God I had someone who tutored me on how to use each one separately so that I at least didn't go in head first, not knowing what was on the other side. I think the best integration I used throughout the project was the internet. It provided a researching haven for me, and it allowed me to find whatever I needed to know. Where did George Lucas film the Star Wars scenes in the towns? How much money was spent on special effects in the Terminator movies? How can I add laser beams using Final Cut Pro? How do I color correct in iMovie? All these things were at my disposal because of the internet, and without it, researching and getting the job done would have been 10 times as difficult. I learned that technology is basically the enemy though, which is really nice because that's what sci-fi movies are all about, and that's what we were aiming for. Throughout editing, I had continuous problems with software crashing, not being able to import specific video types into editors, losing saved data. It was like I was fighting against nothing, and I was losing. Adobe After Effects was the biggest beast to conquer. It had so many delay issues, and a few days before the assigned deadline, the software crashed and deleted all of my special effects. I was furious, but now I have a war story to tell my grandchildren. I eventually switched over to Final Cut Pro to add my effects, but it was late, and the way of adding them was different than After Effects, so it took more time, and I didn't get to express my creativity as much. It more or less became a race against the clock.